Hi, folks. It is 6:33 p.m. on the 19th of June. We are 48 hours, really give or take only a few minutes away from the full moon in Capricorn. The first full moon in Capricorn, I should say, in 2024. Over the next 48 hours, and you may even have felt this over the last 24 hours, full mooniness will or increase or rise. And I'm sorry, there's a child somewhere like in the vicinity. My window's closed, but you might hear some child sounds, and I can't do anything about it, and we should all be nice to children anyway. So I think it's like a very small child. You know how they're, anyway, why am I even going on about this? Because it's a full moon, maybe. Now, full moon behavior's intensity increases about 72, but especially 48 hours before full moon. And then we typically can continue to feel the intensity for about 24 hours after a full moon, sometimes up to 48, but the next 4 or 5 days essentially. And of course, yet another siren in Glendale, California. Why? I don't know. Every time I do videos, sirens abound. Oh my God, it must be a full moon, because I am certainly feeling full moony. Now, it's an intensification of emotional and intuitive energy. On the positive side, those of you who watch my videos, I'm just going to keep this for a minute or so, because those of you who have watched my full moon videos will be like, oh no, he's saying this again and again. But for people who are new, with full moons on the positive side, there can be visibility, there can be culminations, there can be offers, there can be the completion of something, there can be the highlighting of something. It's a spotlight. If it is visibility, if you are finding yourself visible within a community or online or on Facebook or Instagram, just know that there's a temporariness to that visibility. It's for about 72 hours or so. It's rare that but very often around full moons, people can leave companies, situations, relationships. And on the more challenging side, I'm wondering, I ate dinner like half an hour ago. I hope there's nothing in my teeth. Anyway, if there is, too bad. You can have a full moon reaction to that. On the more challenging side, as I say, the sort of emotional pot of milk can come to a boil and spill over. There can be tantrums, there can be meltdowns, there can be an intensity of feeling, as you can tell. There can be, and for people who cry easily, there's so much about sort of bodily liquids and terraneous liquids and the full moon and the pull that it exercises and the general Wolverine-ness and everybody coming out to some extent. Temperature, if it's you who's having a meltdown, if it's somebody else who's having a meltdown towards you, do pay attention to it, because very often sort of our emotional truth, how we're feeling emotionally about something, and not just about something, about things around that something, can get revealed through these kinds of intensification of emotional energies. I like to say that at the time of a new moon 2 weeks ago, a wave starts to move to a shore, and at the time of the full moon, it crashes to the shore. I also like to say that while heading towards a full moon can mean an increase in productivity, it also often means an increase in activity in the size and scale of our to-do lists. And the energy is somewhat unwieldy, so that even if we're achieving things, there's often a sense or feeling that we are not quite being able to keep up with everything. Or it's an unwieldy kind of productiveness, which means that it's really not necessarily a kind of balanced productivity. That emerges after the full moon for about a week or so. And we find that we are in a greater place of emotional equilibrium. The wave is starting the process of receding from the shore, and we're able to get a lot of things done. The week after the new moon, the moon is still dark for about 3 or 4 days, increasing, and then it's headed to the full moon. And the emotional energies for the first 2 weeks of the month are gathering momentum. And it's after the moon crests that we can have some balance. Similarly, I have done a weekly overview just yesterday and posted that yesterday. So if you want to get a general broad sense of the energy of the week and the energy of the time, that is the video that I would look at. Just so you know, this one's going to be focused on the full moon. But Related to that, part of the energy of this full moon is likely to be related to the fact that now that Venus and Mercury are separating from the sun and are increasingly less and less combust, they too put us in a place of greater productivity. We had Mars squaring Pluto on June the 11th, and we may indeed have felt the intensification, the toppling over of that energy as we headed to the 11th, and in about the week after that, we may still have been dealing with, till yesterday, as I said in the video yesterday, we may have been, and our to-do lists may have been at the mercy of other opportunities and action needing to be taken in the Taurus part of the chart, where Mars squared Pluto, Pluto being in Aquarius. And us feeling the pressure to take communication action or relationship building action or financial protection action in the Gemini parts of the chart to help stabilize Saturn and Neptune in the Pisces part of the chart. All of that pressure might have been building, and again, starting yesterday, we may feel like we have it in our power more to exercise greater control over our to-do list, or at least have more of a sense of balance so that we can start to get back on track. And I would encourage everyone to get back on the horse with regard to moving towards the opportunities and the change that you want to create. That could be related to the change that you've been trying to create since April, May, June, July of last year, but you guys all know this narrative by now, but were thwarted from doing so till about March of this year. And then between March and the end of April, we had the eclipses and the choices became narrowed down. And May, June, July of this year, forward movement. And June is the most kind of, between May, June, and July, the most stressful and intense month because of all the squares we have. Venus, Mercury, the Sun, the new moon in Gemini, squaring Saturn, squaring Neptune. Now Venus and Mercury have entered the sign of Cancer. So has the Sun. That is why we have the full moon in Capricorn. Actually, the Sun enters Cancer tomorrow. The Sun enters the sign of Cancer tomorrow. That is why on the 21st, in the very first degree of Capricorn, we have the first of two full moons. By virtue of the fact that it is a Capricorn full moon, again, archetypally, around the time of these full moons, we may feel a greater sense of urgency around getting back on track with regard to our goals. Less at the mercy of a pressure, a feeling of pressure of action needing to be taken, and more feeling like we can proactively start to get back on track. And we may really feel part of the intensity and the stress we may be feeling is feeling like somehow June has required action of us, but the action we have taken to some extent has dealt with trying to understand the chaos and the lack of structure and clarity in the Pisces part of the charts, the house occupied by Pisces in our chart, and part of it being taken over by the Mars-Pluto square, but feeling like action has been needed to be taken, but we haven't completely successfully done what we've needed to do, either because we were at the mercy of other forces dictating where we could spend our energy, or feeling or it's just not a comfortable energy. And I'm hoping, and with the Capricorn full moons archetypally, by the nature of the sign of Capricorn, there may be a sense of much more, in a much more collected and structured manner, getting back on top of things. And I'm hoping this is the case. So whether or not it feels unwieldy over the next 72 hours or so or not, I'm hoping that for all of us, we can start to exert some pressure to mitigate crises. Necessity being the mother of invention, as one of you viewers pricelessly mentioned. Remember that the two things that are moving us forward right now are doors closing and the stress that they create, financial stress, job stress, prompting us to take action to avoid crises and catastrophe. necessity is the mother of invention. A certain amount of stress and deadlines can be much more motivating around taking action and creating a new reality than a certain amount of ease. And certainly with all the squares that June has presented to us, it's all about feeling that pressure and that necessity, whether we're able to take all the action we need to or not. It could be housing situations, you know, and then the second half of the things that are motivating us are, of course, where it is that we want to go and where it is that we feel called to go, where the opportunities are, where are the open doors that have shown up, where do we need to show up and do our best, what seems exciting to us. Could be related very much to the house occupied by the sign of Aries in each of our charts, because that is where the North Node eclipses are taking place. That is what is being pulled to do, and of course releasing in the Libra part of the chart. So with all of that, emotional intensification of energy, possible visibility, possible increase in activities, but also hopefully an ability for us to start to exert some power over what actions we can take to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart, to give it structure and draw boundaries if we feel that nebulous or deceptive behaviors are still continuing there, to give it some structure and ambition and some plans if we want to move the Pisces part of a chart in a more spiritual or artistic direction. Actions recently having been taken in the Taurus part of the chart to allow Pluto in the Aquarius part of the chart to create its transformation. And there's no other way to describe it. With Mars, we're talking about action, pursuing goals, taking advantage of opportunities. Again, setting up boundaries and managing conflict and competition. I think we will feel more. I think that the Mars-Pluto square is now behind us, and the activities related to it are behind us. I think insofar as our to-do list is concerned, it is much more around getting back on track to mitigate the crises in our lives, to continue to move in the direction that we move to that feels expansive and adventurous in the next, where the doors are open and what we kind of feel like we've been longing to do since last April, May, June, July of 2023, with an understanding, if you're watching these videos, that that transformation is likely not going to be complete for another year. But May, June, July allow us to move forward. So what needs to be done in order to feel ready and to push the envelope further so that as opportunities arise and as we're asked to release, we're ready to do so, and that process isn't cumbersome, or it's as uncumbersome as possible. These might be the kinds of things that show up on your to-do list as we head towards this full moon and the next full moon a month from now. I'm going to qualify that in a second. But also the fact that Venus and Mercury are less and less combust means that the energetic dip, the introvertedness, the inability to find our communication energy, our transaction energy, our relationship building energy, our financial energy over the last week and a half or so, even since the beginning of June to some extent, because Venus and the Sun were conjunct what? Was it June the 4th? I think it was June the 4th. As we start to get more of that energy, and as, you know, just as the moon after it conjuncts the sun, just as the moon after it opposes the sun at a time of a full moon, and it's the week after the full moon that we find appropriate balance. It's similarly with Venus and Mercury. It takes a little bit longer. It's not quite as immediate because we want Venus and Mercury to clear the sun a little bit more. But when Venus and Mercury are direct and they conjunct the sun, we consider it. They never get a chance to be full. Venus and Mercury never oppose the sun. From our perspective, from the way we see them and the sun, they're always close to the sun. Mercury is especially close to the sun. Venus is also close to the sun. Mars is the first planet, being on the other side of us, as far as the sun is concerned, that looks to us as if it's going around us. So an intensification of energy, an urge to find our energy and try to take control of things, and most importantly, use the forward-moving months of May, June, July, but especially now starting June, to take the actions that we feel like over the next week and a half. I would encourage you to do so. Now, when I said I wanted to qualify this, so the full moon is happening in your 12th house. So that would mean it's happening in the sign of Capricorn. If you are an Aquarius rising, the full moons, the 2 full moons in Capricorn will happen in your 12th house. Or if the full moons are happening in your 4th house, if you're a Libra rising, Scorpio, Sag, Capricorn, and you have the full moons in your 4th house, it's a little bit different. The energy may dip a certain amount. It may not be quite as active. In the 12th house, if you're Aquarius rising, you may really feel the need to, around the times of the full moon, rest, release, recoup energy, be less active. Because the sign of Cancer is in your 6th house, and with the planets moving to the sign of Cancer and the July the 5th new moon, expect the rest of the next month or so to be busy, and you might need to find these 2 pockets around these 2 full moons to be time of rest. If you are Libra rising and you have these 2 full moons clearly in your 4th house, unless you're dealing with housing issues and finding housing and moving or repairs or needing to tend to housing, if that's the case, then you might be really busy from a, if there's something going on with your mom, or you're in the middle of arguing, or some sort of boundary setting, or or you're dealing with something real estate related, it could be that these 2 full moons also find you in a more hermity space, because they're happening in the 4th house of home, land, real estate. This is much more internal energy. The rest of us can pretty much expect an increase in energy. The full moon in Capricorn is related to the new moon in Cancer on July the 5th. This is the last of the full moons around this, with the cycle that's just leading up to here, that has occurred 2 weeks before the new moon it is related to. A new moon occurs, a full moon occurs in the opposite sign. When the sun is in a particular sign and the moon is opposite it in the opposite sign, the full moon occurs. So far, we've been having full moons first and the new moon 2 weeks later. So what it's felt like is we have the full moon, and 2 weeks later, new moon occurs that then builds on the issues brought up by that full moon. Because the full moon is occurring in the 1st degree of Capricorn, the next full moon is going to occur in the last degree of Capricorn. There are 30 degrees in each sign. There are 28 degrees that separate each new moon and full moon, where each degree for us kind of stands for a day. And a lunar cycle is a 28-day cycle. So after this particular full moon, we're going to have the new moon in Cancer, then we will have a full moon in Capricorn. And from then on, until we deal with this 2 lunations in a particular sign issue again, from then on, the full moons will happen 2 weeks after their new moon. We're going to have the new moon in Cancer on July the 5th, a Capricorn full moon 2 weeks later. Then we're going to have the new moon in Leo, the related Aquarius full moon 2 weeks after that, new moon in Virgo, related full moon 2 weeks after that in Pisces, etc., etc. So it's a more intuitive cycle. The new moon starts, we have a culminating increase in the opposite sign and back. And this idea of the opposite sign with a full moon is an important one to note. Opposing houses are so intensely connected and so utterly related to each other. they're so one circle where one is yin and one is yang. If the first house is us, the seventh house is important, significant people in our lives with whom we have commitments, whether they're personal or impersonal, where the breaking of those commitments could turn problematic for us or even legal for us. If the second house is us and our sense of self-worth and what we value and our income and our paycheck and our independent abundance, the eighth house is what we share with others emotionally and financially. If the third house is how we fit in with our immediate community and how we communicate with them and the chatter and the gossip and the collegiality, the ninth house is where we separate from the well that we live and we interact with on a day-to-day basis and connect with spirit and our truth and our integrity. If the fourth house is home, land, real estate, how it feels at home, domestic security, early childhood. The 10th house, the most private part of the chart. The 10th house is the most public part of the chart. Career, fame, notoriety. If the fifth house is our individual stardom and joy, creativity, romance, creations, children, the 11th house is us within a community, within ensembles, not as a solo player, friends, friendships, networks. If the sixth house is the busiest part of the chart, our ability and our responsibility to take care of ourselves, health, our ability, our responsibility to take care of others, chores, jobs, pets, subordinates, then the 12th house is the least busy part of the chart. The last house where you put up your feet or you're isolated and you take a timeout. Sometimes the timeouts are forced. It's the part of the chart that has to do with hospitals and prisons. And I'm talking about a more humane purpose for that kind of forced isolation, a timeout to reflect, to heal, to reflect on consequence. The 12th house is where God talks to us, dreams, intuition. It is a release, whereas the 6th house is control. So with these opposing energies, when you have a new moon in a certain part of a chart, the full moon in the opposite part of the chart is a kind of a emotional and intuitive reaction to the activities surrounding the month created by the new moon. So, if you are Libra rising and the sign of Cancer is in your 10th house, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, yeah, I'm not crazy, then if we look at 2024, not only have Venus and Mercury entered your career house, the Sun is about to enter your career house. On July the 5th, there's going to be a new moon in your career house. But with this full moon 48 hours from now and the full moon a month from now, your home, land, real estate sector, your private sector is going to have some sort of a flare-up, some sort of a reaction to whatever it is that is developing and growing and the nature of the month or whatever it is that you're investing in or starting or reviewing or the opportunities that you're pursuing or what you're communicating in the career part of the chart. If you are a Capricorn rising and you are entering a month on July the 5th, but already with Venus and Mercury in the 7th house and the Sun coming into the 7th house tomorrow, you are going to be looking at and evaluating your partnerships and commitments, then the two full moons in the first house can mean temporary visibility during that time, but they can also mean tantrums. They can also mean boundary setting. They can also mean self-assertion related to those partnerships. You're evaluating how your marriage is going, how your committed partnerships are going, how your business partnerships are going, how your more impersonal partnerships are going, how your family commitments are going, where there are legal and financial commitments. And you have 2 full moons with a Capricorn full moon where you might be, it's time for culmination, it's time for an intensification. Me versus the other party. And you can apply that wherever that's happening in your chart. Whatever it is that occurs around this full moon somehow has a relationship with the Cancer new moon on July the 5th, which starts to address or deal with whatever it is that this full moon brings up starting July the 5th. Lovely new moon on July the 5th. Trine Saturn. Thank the Lord. Whatever it is that we're going to construct is going to have to be in a responsible direction, but at least we have some harmonious flow with Saturn. At least Saturn is ready to say, all right, let me help. Let's help each other. Let's work together. As opposed to the squares we've had with Saturn and very recently with Neptune, where both those planets were like, not so fast, you're not going anywhere, I'm blocking progress until you address and deal with what I am trying to do in the sign of Pisces. Oh Venus, oh Mercury, oh Sun going through Gemini, chattering away. Then, after the new moon in Cancer, 2 weeks later, we'll have another full moon in Capricorn. Another reaction, and then, of course, as we head towards August the 4th, we have the Leo new moon, and Cancer season officially is done. Even though we now, as of tomorrow, Cancer season officially begins in the way we understand it and colloquially talk about it, keep in mind that the Gemini energies are still active till the July 5th new moon in Cancer, because we are very much in the Gemini month, started with the new moon in Gemini on June the 6th. So if there's still Gemini-related activities and actions you need to take, you've got another couple of weeks in which to take care of them. There was so much I wanted to share that I actually wrote down notes. There's something about this full moon where we proactively have the opportunity to start something or contend with something that can reach a kind of culmination point a month from now. As I have mentioned to you, June is an edgy time. Not only was the new moon in Gemini squaring Saturn and the planets going through Gemini, and indeed Mars entering Taurus, squaring away, being held in check by the longer term planets, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, demanding attention, blocking a certain amount of progress, demanding that actions be taken to serve them. June is not a month of culmination necessarily, at least not so far. There could be something that comes up around the full moon by virtue of the fact that it's a full moon, but it does not completely resolve itself or become a path forward for another month or so. The full moon itself, 48 hours from now, is square Neptune. Now, the sun squares Neptune today, I think, or tomorrow, enters the sign of Cancer, and then on Friday, on the 21st, creates the full moon, opposes the moon. Just a little bit before the full moon happens, the moon itself also squares Neptune and Pisces. Neptune and Pisces is one definitive dispositor of this full moon chart. The full moon is in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. The ruler of this full moon is Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces. That the new moon month that we're in Gemini, June the 6th squared, Doesn't it feel like a Saturn month? What are you doing? Are you being responsible enough? I'm not going to make this easy. I'm not going to give you anything easily. How are you going to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart where there's been a crisis brewing since 2012 that may have peaked in 2016-17? What are you doing in the Gemini part of the chart to make sure that my needs are met? I've tried to bring visibility to the Pisces part of the chart if there's been any deceptiveness or fogginess, give you clarity, but there's still actions needing to be done. How are you acting? Are you acting in ways that are wise? And here we are just exhausted. Mercury's combust and Venus is combust. And yes, it's lovely that we're in the middle of their cycles. And yeah, as they move forward, it'll be lovely to have these trees that have taken root bear fruit. But, you know, while those planets are moving fast, we don't completely have access to that energy either. Saturn in Pisces is one of the rulers of this chart, of the full moon. But Saturn himself is disposited by, because he's in Pisces, the rulers of Pisces. Neptune, a clear dispositor of this chart. The full moon is square Neptune. I'm going to expand on this and explain what this means in a second. Don't worry. And the other ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. Jupiter is in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon is in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So between Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, and the moon, they have kind of a ricocheting dispositorship, which when we get to about 4 planets, I'm like, whatever. But the 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, are bringing an intense awareness. You know, with Neptune, when it comes to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, as I've mentioned to you, they create changes that we don't have a lot of agency with those changes. With Pluto, the challenge is resistance. Resistance is futile. Pluto knows what is good for us, and what is not good for us will fall away. And the problem with Pluto occurs, the so-called power struggles that I've mentioned to you numerous times occur when we're holding on to something that Pluto's saying, you need to let go of this. Or when some other situation, or typically some other person or people are holding on to us because Pluto wants us to be free from them and they're not letting us be free for some reason. With Neptune, where we get into trouble is with control and seeking clarity. Under Neptune's influence, if something is going on. Now, Neptune is a planet of intense, blissful, Sufistic. So when I say blissful, I mean spiritual high, ecstasy. It's the anti-Saturn planet. If Saturn is about success on this earthly plane, Neptune is like, what's the earthly plane? It's all BS. Let's connect with what is really real. Can't you feel it? And isn't everything else BS? Well, the challenge is, you know, while it's lovely to feel that bliss and that connection every now and then, and it is lovely, and if you commit to a really sort of ascetic or ascetic, however you choose to pronounce that word, or totally renunciatory path, then Neptune is your guy. By all means, swim in oceanic, spiritually oceanic, boundaryless, blissful depths. Certainly romantically, we're talking about an intense feeling of connection that can translate into the physical side of things as well. Artistically, it is just inspiration. The muses speaking to us. It's not epiphanies. Music especially. And of course, in its more challenging connotations, we have anything that can help us lose our grip with reality, sometimes in a positive way to give us a break. Music can be a kind of a narcotic or a study break or a relaxant. It allows us to let go of things, that dream space, that daydream space. Certain types of altering substances, alcohol, other substances, if used, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But on the more challenging side, of course, Neptune can show up with a destructive disconnection with reality as well. When Neptune is showing up to create loss, then that is when we have those situations that I've been talking about in the sign of Pisces, which is feeling like people are lying, not being entirely clear, being deceptive. But the problem with Neptune is that it doesn't have to be all that all the time. But once someone has been Neptunian towards you, lied, not being completely honest, it becomes very, very hard to continue to see them and everything associated with them through that Neptunian lens. And then that can lead us into a space of lack of clarity, not knowing what is real and what is not real, sometimes thinking that things are happening that actually are not. But because of the way situations and people or you have operated, there's a Neptunian haze around either you can't trust someone or a situation, or they can't trust you, or it's just a mess. When the facts may not be that dire, something may have happened at a certain time, it may be contained. So Neptune can just obscure everything and then create more chaos, burn more bridges, obscure more bridges. Ultimately, of course, Neptune is saying everything that you're fighting over is kind of worthless. You're not going to take it with you anyway. Nothing and nobody belongs to you. That is the Neptunian lesson. But it is a very especially within the context of relationships and shared resources, we need to feel sometimes that we are standing up for ourselves when appropriate and setting boundaries where appropriate and not being taken advantage of and not being treated disrespectfully and not treating others disrespectfully and blah, 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 blah. So you're left with this confusion of, all right, I know that when I leave this earthly plane, I'm not taking anything with me, but until then, there has to be some limit. But with Neptune, just as with Pluto, resistance is futile, with Neptune, seeking complete clarity and thinking that you'll ever be able to control or manage a situation is futile. Saturn is trying in the sign of Pisces to educate us on various levels. Here's what's really going on. And yes, it might be sobering. And yes, if you're trying to move in a spiritual direction or an artistic direction, don't you want to make a career of it? And don't you want to be successful? So let's come up with a plan. It's very Saturn. Let's concretize this. Saturn may also be trying to say, let me try and explain to you, even if you were right, how some of your behaviors have led to some of these consequences. So what is the wisest way to operate in this realm of Pisces so you can stabilize it? The Sun, our internal, most connected to source self, that knows, that sees, that evaluates, that is quiet, bright, light. And the Moon, that is our emotional and our intuitive response to everything that is going on around us. The two luminaries, both square Neptune. Neptune says to this full moon, just a second. You cannot go past this checkpoint without reflecting on what you need to do in the Cancer and especially the Capricorn part of the chart to deal with me. It could be to deal with that delusional quality to deal with structuring something artistic or spiritual. And when I say the delusional quality, I mean kind of losing the grip of reality in the Pisces part of our chart since 2012. The loss, again, with Pluto may be the right thing for us, or may be good for us, but the process is just so. With Pluto, at least you just have to surrender to it. With Neptune, it is just like when you were being gaslit, it is just so intuitively stressful and consuming. What do you need to do in the Capricorn part of the chart, my dears, that you can start working on now and have completed in about a month's time with the second Capricorn full moon, that can help mitigate some of the fogginess and the confusion, possible deception, but also structure if you're trying to move in a spiritual and artistic direction, the Pisces part of your chart. It couldn't be clearer. A month from now, the Sun will trine Neptune. The other transit that is happening at the time of this full moon is that Mercury in Cancer is squaring the nodes. The North Node in Aries, where we are meant to lean into and have our sense of growth and adventure. The South Node in Libra, where we are meant to release something. So we may be on a little bit of a seesaw, being combust with the sun and still dark, kind of internally processing what we need to do to move things forward in that desired direction that I've been talking about, that we may have been desiring since the middle of 2023. And that is a path that we'll continue to move towards till the middle of 2025. But also in a place where we start to take some sort of action around it as the Mercury becomes more and more visible. Sometime next week, Venus, the planet of relationships and money, will also square the nodes. So again, squares abound. Time to get back on the horse. Time to move towards the direction we want to move towards. Time to figure out how we can organize and structure ourselves. Time to figure out how we can reclaim our energy now that Venus and Mercury are done and moving forward. I've done a video on the Mercury-Venus-Sun conjunction and what that means. I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. Not yesterday's weekly overview, but last week's weekly overview talked about the Mercury-Sun conjunction and how it is falling in the middle of an Aries communication cycle. So you can look to that to get clarity on that if you're curious about what the Venus and Mercury conjunctions with the Sun have been about. The next full moon, 4 weeks from now, the Sun trines Neptune, the full moon trines Mars and Jupiter. Mars especially, Mars in Taurus, Jupiter in Gemini, loosely. There are other trines that are abounding. There are a couple of squares too, and of course, the full moon 4 weeks from now conjuncts Pluto. Transformation. Some will say that that is the more intense full moon. Yes, it's a full moon conjunct Pluto. It's a full Pluto. The Sun is opposite Pluto, not visible to the naked eye, but fully lit up, and the moon next to it, fully lit up. And the moon and Pluto are, I think, within, what, a degree of each other? There's the opportunity to get back on the horse, as I've said. May, June, July are forward months. May, on the diving board, we feel the momentum, we're excited and terrified. We get to the edge of the diving board. June, we dive off of it. And so far, some of us may have dived off of it, but some of us are holding on to it. So whether it is taking steps to facilitate change and moving in the direction that you want to, the Aries part of the chart, the Taurus part of the chart, some of it being actions need to be taken because there are crises and necessity demanding that we take action. Now that Mercury and Venus clear the sun and we get some of our energy back, now that we're not dealing with that Mars-Pluto square defining what is on our to-do list, now we get to reclaim that energy, make something happen so that by the time we get to July 21st and the full moon is conjunct Pluto and it is transformation time, we can at least by the end of July say, I have done as much as I could and moved things forward as much as I could by the end of July. Till the end of July, forward movement. You hit August 1st and you are 4 days away from the new moon in Leo. Fine, but the moon will be dark. But then on the 5th, Mercury goes retrograde. August is a time we hit the pause button and say, all right, Mercury, what have I missed? What do I not know? What has been in my blind spot? What have I intuitively kind of seen but ignored? What do I need to invest in? What's going to actually manifest? What is not going to manifest? Where do I need to change course? What did I think would materialize or turn into something but is not going to? Mercury conjuncting Sun recently is a minor Mercury retrograde. I read a comment. I think someone posted a comment about how something that they were expecting to have happen didn't happen or something along those lines. June is not a month of culminations. June is a time of continuing to be in action. The sign of Capricorn is a very important sign in 2024. In the beginning of the year and in December, when we had planets, the personal planets, the Sun, Mercury, Venus going over Capricorn, and we had Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. And we had a Capricorn communication cycle occurring that took us from, was it December 22nd, I think, of 2023. To the middle of April. I told you, the thing is, Pluto is only spending about a quarter of the year in the sign of Capricorn. Now, Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, and it wraps up its transit through Capricorn by November of this year. Between September and November, it is back in Capricorn. And of course, for the first 20 days of January, it was in Capricorn. And it's easy to overlook the sign of Capricorn this year because Pluto's presence in Aquarius has more time to it. Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces. Chiron and the North Node are in Aries. Uranus is in Taurus. We had Jupiter in Taurus till May 25th. Jupiter is in Gemini. Cancer is the first sign with the Sun and Mercury and Venus, and we're going to have the new moon on July the 5th. That is normal. Regular in terms of where the transits are occurring, but not for long. Once we get into Leo, and even the sign of Cancer, by the time we get to that Mars retrograde later on in the year, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo and Virgo. We have Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer later on this year into early next year. And the Mars retrograde in Cancer is going to be opposing Pluto. Transformational year, 2024. The heart of transformation. Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th. Next 12, 13 months after that is when we see the results of that change. Similar in magnitude to what may have shifted for us, as I've mentioned to you before, in the last half of 2010 and the beginning of 2011, but we felt the impact of that change in 2011 and the beginning of 2012. 2012 to 2020 being a Venus cycle, 2020 to 2028. We're in the middle of, with this Venus-Sun conjunction that just happened. I'm going to refer you back to that Sun-Venus conjunction video that I did a couple of weeks ago, to which I'm going to place a link, was, our Venus cycles. Certainly between December 22nd and the middle of April, with the communication cycle being a Capricorn communication cycle, a certain foundation was built in the Capricorn part of our chart. Now we have 2 full moons. Another clue to these full moons is what needs to be done related to those activities in the first 4 months of the year where a foundation was being laid to carry that work forward in such a way that that work can actually manage, counter Neptune's influence in the sign of Pisces. You may need to take certain actions related to the Capricorn part of the chart. You may have an awareness of what needs to be sorted out, cleaned up in the Cancer part of the chart. The Sun being in Cancer, Venus being in Cancer, Mercury being in Cancer. What actions need to be taken in the Capricorn part of the chart over the next month, reaching a culmination by the next Capricorn full moon, the 20th of July. That carries on the work of the first 4 months related to the sign of Capricorn. Then Pluto comes back into Capricorn, September, October, November. What needs to be wrapped up with the Plutonian transformation to make Pluto feel like I did my best by you? Do not ignore the Capricorn part of your chart in 2024. The first 4 months, as I've said, yes, we have heavy hitters in the next consecutive set of signs, but here we are, 2 full moons in Capricorn. And it is because of this that I did those series of videos that started to say, let's look at what the energy of Capricorn is like over the next transits and aspects over the next 12 months. Then I looked at Aquarius, then I looked at Pisces, then I looked at Aries, then I looked at Taurus, then I did the Jupiter and Gemini video. I may do a video on the aspects in Capricorn. Now, one more thing about this full moon. Yes, it's square Neptune, but it is also still, for all intents and purposes, the moon itself is opposing Venus. Mercury has moved further away from the sun. Venus is still about 5 or 6 degrees away from the sun in Cancer. And the full moon is opposing the sun and Venus. Will not surprise me, of course, if relationship and financial considerations. We just had Venus and Mercury square Neptune move into Cancer. We have the Sun doing the same tomorrow. This full moon is about taking action in the Capricorn part of the chart to help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. And relationship and financial considerations related to stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart, but also related to the actions that need to be taken in the Capricorn part of the chart, may be top of mind. Above all, it is a reclamation of our agency over our to-do list towards the changes we want to make and the crises we want to avoid. Period. Now, as I said, if you're an Aquarius rising, you may need to take a break. If you're a Libra rising and you're not dealing with real estate issues, beautification of a property or moving in somewhere or actively looking for something or repairing something at home or it isn't active at home, it could be that you also just find that you need to rest. God, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think I got everything out there. This was a fun video to do. I feel like I've shared certain things even related to full moons that I don't think that I've necessarily shared before. We talked about the importance of the Capricorn sign, the Capricorn part of the chart, the archetype of Capricorn and taking charge of your life, the energy of the time, more proactive than it has been in June, where we are at within the May, June, July forward movement. It is a full moon. Understand that you will be rocked emotionally and intuitively, probably. What can be started now that ends in a month's time related to Capricorn-related activities? The house occupied by Capricorn in your chart and what that house stands for. Building on the communication cycle in Capricorn between December 22nd of last year and April of this year? What could you put in place that could bring visibility, that could bring a certain amount of culmination, that could build on that? Connected to the Cancer new moon, we talked about the nature of the opposing sign full moons and how it's an intuitive and emotional reaction to what is going on in the sign where the sun is, and often Mercury is, and sometimes Venus is. In this case, true. I'm summarizing it, but the summary actually is a little bit more confusing and rushed than the rest of the video. You have the rest of the video where I take you through all of that more slowly, and you can piece each of these strands together by understanding how it creates this full moon. But ultimately, for most of us, get back on the horse, proactive action, move towards opportunity, prepare for opportunity. Sometimes moving towards and preparing for opportunity means ending things where we are. If you take the analogy of moving to an apartment or moving to a certain place or traveling or getting ready to go with the understanding that we may not get on that plane till October of this year, or maybe even completely be moved till May or June of next year, then moving towards opportunity could look like decluttering where we are, packing up, throwing things out. If we take the travel analogy, arranging for pet sitters, making sure the readiness is all, to quote the bard, I think. Mercury squares the nodes a day after the full moon. Full moon is opposite Venus squaring Neptune. God, we covered that. Whatever action needs to be taken could potentially help stabilize and make the Pisces part of the chart clearer. And we may have financial and relationship issues on our mind. There could be communications related to the direction we need to move in and what we need to release. But this particular full moon and the tasks we want to do could very much have to do with relationships and financial considerations. The next full moon, 4 weeks from now, conjunct Pluto, visibility to transformation. The sun trines Neptune. The squares to Neptune have a chance of easing up with whatever it is that you implement starting now over the next 28 days, related to the sign of Capricorn. It trines Mars in Taurus. Thereby supporting a part of the chart that has, along with the sign of Aries, been a place of between May of 2023 and May 25th of 2024, beckoning us forward. More loosely, it trines Jupiter and Gemini, again ending a 12-13 year cycle in Gemini, starting a 12-13 year cycle. I'm talking about the next full moon, giving you a preview. That is all I have to say about this full moon. Reclaim your energy gently, my darlings. Get back on track. The energy does start to become easier as we head into next week. We're going to start to feel glimmers of the July energy. We're going to start to feel like, okay, maybe I'm going to start to see some results. It's the July 5th new moon that we're really waiting for with the trine to Saturn. And the full moon after that. July brings a certain amount of flow again. June is just like, how many flames can the universe put under our butt? And just how much does the universe think we're going to be able to do and complete? But it has that, you got to act, you got to take care of this, you got to stabilize the place better. Starting next week, we do, with Mercury getting in place to trine Saturn, with Venus then heading towards trining Saturn to Cancer, the Sun, then Neptune, it starts to ease things up a little bit. And remember, when it comes to taking action related to the sign of Gemini to help stabilize, we're talking about Venus and Mercury. We're talking about relationship building to the best of our ability. We're not at a place where Mars is squaring Saturn and Neptune. Things will become more assertive in the second half of this year. Now, there could be a feeling that certain boundaries need to be set or certain things need to be done because someone or something has an eye on our finances or our relationships in some way. That's possible. And you may feel like you need to take actions to mitigate that or cover that. But we're still talking Venusian and Mercurial actions. So it doesn't have to be a hugely combative time. That doesn't mean that boundaries can't be set, but they can also be set in a Venusian way. Polite, cordial, respectful, clear. Healthy boundaries make healthy relationships. As opposed to get off my lawn, which is more Mars. And I'm talking more about the residual energy that we might be carrying over because we couldn't give it a lot of attention over the past 2 or 3 weeks. We may be feeling like we've still got some pending work to do related to the Sun and Venus and Mercury transits through Gemini, which are technically now complete, but we weren't able to get to them because we were so busy dealing with that darn Mars-Pluto square and the activities and action items that Mars was putting on our plate as we headed towards June the 11th. Hopefully, for a lot of us, activities related to the houses ruled by Mercury and Venus will start to become more visible as we head into next week. I think we could all start to do with that. Hopefully there's more flow. Hopefully there's more financial flow. Hopefully there's more relationship flow. That's at least my hope. As we, especially, I have a feeling that we're looking at the July 5th new moon to bring in kind of light into the chart again. But for now, think about getting back on the horse and think about what it is that you need to do and get done related to the first 4 months of this year, the Capricorn part of the chart, the taking action of which, the building of which, will help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. If you found this video useful, tell your friends about it, blah, blah, blah. Give it more visibility by all means. It'll help me. It'll help the channel. If you would like me to take a look at your birth chart and give you a reading, my email address is in the description box below. You can email me there and I'll send you information about rates, etc. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe to it, please, and click on the bell icon next to it. And if you hover over the bell icon, there's a wiggly bell on top. Click on that. You'll be notified when I do a new video. If you want to contribute to the channel, there's a thanks button. You can use that to contribute towards it. And by all means, feel free to comment and like. It gives the video more circulation on YouTube. Thank you for your support. And have a productive full moon. Even if you are one of those couple of rising signs for whom productivity might look like rest. See you guys soon.